the very short slide deck this week, and its main focus is on Java, Codingbat, and functions. So if you go here to the website, scroll down a bit, this is the slide presentation we'll be using. You may as well open this codingbat.com tab, open this link in another tab, and for this thing, we'll eventually get to also. I'll make an assignment on Google Classroom for this Codingbat problem set, which will be due next Friday. This Friday it's lightning. So while we're here, take a couple minutes, go to codingbat.com and create an account. Once you're there, the hardest part is just going to Preferences in the upper right hand corner and adding me as your teacher, so using my email. Notice there's no s.sfusd.edu because those are students, I'm a teacher. And then enter in your block name, last name, first name. That makes it so it's easy for me to grade and all of you are grouped together like it is in Synergy and Google Classroom. So this is where I'll pause and I'll wait a couple minutes. I'll read off your name if you're in my Codingbat roster, and you're cool to look on to the next couple slides. So we finished signing up for the Codingbat account. You can email me to double check whether or not you're in your rosters if you're watching this video instead of being at live lecture or picking up textbooks reasons. So this problem set, if you go here, right, functions 1, and I'll make a Google Classroom assignment for this. This is what will be due. When you go here, as you work through these problems, double check that you're actually signed in the upper right hand corner instead of the upper left hand corner. It's kind of cut off on my screen. Let me make it smaller. Oops. Like that. In the upper right hand corner, make sure you're signed in so your progress is saved. Notice in this example web page I have, oops, too much zoom. I only did the first one, so there's a green check mark there. The other ones I have yet to do, so they don't have a check mark there. When you click on it, you'll see this interface. When you have some code, like here, we'll talk about what this thing means. We have a go button, that's what runs code. It gives you error messages, and let's say we return number 1. And then it runs some test cases, kind of like what you saw in CS Awesome. Your goal is to pass all these test cases and get a green check mark. The problem, it's not as coding intensive. Usually they're short ideas, later they'll get more complicated. You aren't drawing pretty pictures or doing anything. Feels like it's a lot of math. So just practice like typing Java code. And Codingbat as a site is really useful because it mirrors what like FRQs would be in the AP test. The difference being you're writing in pen and paper instead of typing it out, and you don't have the luxury of clicking a go button and having the computer like test out whether or not your code is right. You have to do that in your head. And just to talk you through what's going on and then going over the formal things from the slides, in this example we're given 2 integers. When you look at the function definition, those 2 integers are called number 1 and number 2. When someone calls your function, in this case it's going to be called multiply, it's going to return the result of multiplying the first number with the second. Code-wise, right, like you're familiar with this math idea, it looks like this. Number 1 times number 2. Return is a new keyword. Think about like an ellipse, right? The input is like 4 things, 4 arguments, the x, y, width, and height. The output is a circle or an ellipse, an oval to the screen somewhere at those given coordinates. Likewise, the multiply function, right? When we call the multiply function, when we use the multiply function, you have to give it 2 numbers. That's the input. And the output is the product, right? You multiply number 1 by number 2. And the return keyword is like data that's passed in order for the computer to recognize, okay, I need that output. You need the return keyword. It's slightly different than drawing a circle, right? When you call the ellipse function, there isn't really a return anywhere because its output is drawn to the screen. For mostly numbers and stuff, or other kinds of data, you have this return keyword that reports back to whoever called it. So pretty much in Codingbat, there's always going to be returns, at least one return somewhere in your code. Okay, when you do this, you can go back to click on the next one, refresh the page, and you'll see it turn to green. Go forward. You can click next, and it'll bring you to the next part of this problem set. Then you read the directions and follow through and do all, like press go, get the green check mark, and you're good. Progress will be saved as long as you're signed in. If you're not signed in, your code isn't saved. So that's the problem set. And what's nice is it tracks all that data. So it might take you a while, and in like typical role fashion and student fashion, you're probably gonna procrastinate a little bit, and then a lot of people work on their problem sets like the day it's due or a couple hours before it's due. Worst case, it's like due like 11:50, right? You start working on it 10 minutes before the deadline, and then you go past the deadline. So I can see that information. It's kind of nice to see like which one of you are the master procrastinators. So back to that idea, you've heard me use this vocabulary a lot. These are arguments known as inputs, right? For the ellipse function, there's 4 of these. But sometimes we want to make our own functions, and Codingbat kind of eases you into that. It gives you the function like definition, the header, right? And you got to fill in the little what it means to enact that function, to carry out its job. So to this idea of a return value, so it sends the value back to where the function was called. Think about that as like reporting back to whoever used or called you. Like you're on a telephone, like I call Alan, for example, right? He answers. That answering thing is like returning the call, yeah? Same thing with functions. So math.random, when you look into what the Java code is writing, it returns a double that is between 0 and 1 decimal, right? And you can put this function anywhere you can use a double, because that's what the return type is. So notice this line of code, right? The ellipse is now going to have a random position between 0 and 299 inclusive. You can also have it here and store it into this double variable, random. It's kind of hard to explain, but I think it's easy to use, this idea of return types or return. So this part we talked about, right, arguments. In this one, find average takes in a decimal, D1 and D2 of type double and double. Now, the return type is what this first keyword was. So this is where you'll see double, int, bool, char. If it returns other things, something more complicated, if it returns nothing, it'll be void. Okay. And that's usually what you're given in Codingbat. As we learn to code more complicated programs, later you'll be writing your own functions like this, calling it your own name. That makes sense. And so, in order to find the average, you add them up, d1 plus d2 divided by 2. Like if this return keyword wasn't there, this thing would be calculated, but find av wouldn't report that back. It doesn't return anything. So you can't store it anywhere, you can't use it anywhere. That's why you need this return keyword. Okay, so like what, 2, 3 examples? You can type in the chat. what will be printed to the screen once this little code segment runs. Nice. Students got it. Yes, you can private message me or just post in chat. Cool. Couple more answers, yes. Yep. It would be the decimal version, not so much the fraction version. It does do 7/2. That is the correct, or that's the math, which outputs it to be a double, 3.5. So 5 here takes the place of D1. 2 here takes the value of 2. So it's 5 plus 2 in that order. 7 divided by 2, 3.5. We work. Here's a more complicated example. What's this code segment going to output? We're using functions and functions. Okay, reaching consensus. Looks like we got 3 people, 4 people. Yep. Give the people a couple more minutes, a couple more seconds to collect their answers. Nice. Yeah. We're all getting the correct answer. Very good. So with this one, okay, find av. This function is called twice, so we're really adding up 2 numbers. It's finding the average of 5 and 8 and adding that together with the average of 5 and 7. 5 and 8 together make 8 divided by 4 is 4. 5 and 7 added together is 12, divided by 6 is, or divided by 2 is 6, so really in this statement we're adding 4 plus 6 in that order, which is 10. And more specifically, if you're looking at the double type that's returned over here, right, 10.0. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad you made it. So, if you're finished with Lightning or want a little break from Lightning, feel free to click on this first problem set for functions 1. I'll put a formal link on this in Google Classroom. You're working through these problems, and they should be kind of simple. And our focus for next week is going to be talking about functions instead of making pretty pictures and outputs. That will come back in a little bit. I believe that's it. Yeah, we'll get to this next lecture. If you're heading to school to pick up textbooks, good luck. Wear your protective equipment. If you want to stay back, I can double check whether or not you're on my roster, but most of you should have been added. If I call out your name or confirmed, then you're good to go. If you haven't, do stay back a bit so I can confirm that you're in my Codingbat roster. That's all. Have a great Monday. I hope the sun breaks through this dark sky. If anything, it got more orange. I'm scared.